Okay, thank you. So, thanks for everyone coming out for this first session of the morning. I hope you had a good night last night. I hope the conference is going well. And also a quick thanks to AUSVEG and APAL and Boomeroo for having me up here to speak. And the topic for today is From the Source to the Salad Bowl, a holistic look at the supply chain and how we can drive sustainable long-term growth. Now that's quite a mouthful, but fortunately I've got quite a mouth, so we're in good shape. I'm going to let my mouth run pretty quickly today. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to try and get on a plane shortly. I've got 40 minutes worth of slides to try and pack into 15 minutes. Now, some of you probably won't know Harris Farm Markets because we're not a really big player in the Australian market. And have a quick look at our market shares there. We might need to zoom in a little bit to see our market share. And for those at the back of the room, that's us, that little slice in there. Harris Farms, a family-owned fresh food wholesaler and retailer. We've got 23 fresh food markets in New South Wales, 2 produce stands and a ripening centre in Sydney markets. We've got an export division focusing on summer fruits into Asia and a secondary wholesale distribution business. So I supply all the fruit and veg to about 50 IGA stores in New South Wales and about 100 restaurants. We've also got a farm that grows rosemary and quinces and raises Icelandic horses. Now, I know that the last one gives me a very tenuous grip on the right to call myself a farmer. But what the whole system does do is it gives us a fairly good broad overview of the holistic supply chain. And I like to simplify it down to 3 parts, and I know there's lots of parts missing here, and given that Boomeroo sponsored me, I should probably add that there's seeds and seedlings and stuff in the beginning of this, but growing, wholesaling and retailing is the major parts of the supply chain. And it's a lot of fun, our supply chain. It can be a bit of a mess, but it's the game we play, and I like to look at the game as it's a game of poker meets Chinese whispers meets Fight Club. So, first of all, we look at poker, and it's not just any poker, it's floating poker. You've got just as much chance here of getting rich or drowning and going broke. Now, the weather can wash this game out at any time, and it's both an art and a science. That means to succeed, you've got to have a good mix of skill and good luck. And just like any poker tournament, every time someone gets washed out, there's a few less players. And if this keeps going, and that's the way this industry is going, we're going to end up with with a few very large players and not very small players. And I hope that doesn't happen because I'd like to think that there is plenty of room for smaller farmers in Australia. But that volatility in return on farm puts pressure on the whole supply chain. So R&D is really important for reducing that volatility in a range of areas, from pest and water management, anything that helps the crops come on as planned. Now, AUSVEG and APAL are clearly the right kind of bodies for coordinating that kind of work, and so the levies, whilst they're painful, are, I think, a very important part of the future of the industry. So then the product leaves the farm and gets into the wholesale channels, and that's where we've got Chinese whispers. On one side, you've got the size of the crop, who's coming in early, where's there a planting gap, etc. And on the other side, who's paying what to whom, so you've got what's the market price. And the flow of communication is essential up and down the chain, but it's often undervalued by all parts of the supply chain. The retailers are typically not communicating enough back up the stream, and often that message is completely mangled by the time it gets to the people in the field, or even beyond that to the people who are providing the seedlings, etc. Equally, the downstream flow of information could always be better. We as retailers are often caught off guard by something that we feel we should have known a couple of days earlier. And often a couple of days is all it needs to get a much better reaction. And then finally we get to the consumer side of the supply chain, the retailers. I call that Fight Club. That there is a picture of Aldi fighting against Metcash. I'll let you choose which one's which. So all in all, you've got a game of high-stakes gambling with unclear communication feeding a brawl. And, as if that's not bad enough, the requirement for freshness means that we do it all under enormous time pressure. This really is a mug's game. So I thought I'd look at some of the dynamics and see if we can work out what will allow sustainable growth. And I'll start with the part of the supply chain I'm most familiar with, the customer end, that's the retailers. Now, why is it such a punch-up in food retail? First of all, I guess it's a concentrated market. By global standards, the big chains dominate. However, unlike the grocery part of the sector, the independent specialists like us still hold a significant chunk of the business. Martin from Fresh Logic gave me these numbers, and 23% of the fruit and veg sold at retail is sold in independent stores. The market's worth about $12.5 billion, but the long-term growth is not vastly different from population growth on a volume basis, which means it's a very mature market. And if it's a mature market, we can't get people to eat more food in total. They're already eating too much as it is. That means that to grow, a retailer has to take share off other retailers. And mostly they do that by offering cheaper prices. And it does drive consumer demand because food is such a significant chunk of a household's weekly disposable income, and cheap prices, obviously, lead to lower margins. And you can see here, this is 2011, I believe, Woolworths was achieving some of the highest supermarket margins in the world, and they've been criticised recently for that, and it's approaching 8%. 8% is world leading and is too high according to the pundits, who are saying that it should be closer to 5 or 6 to allow them to grow. So to put that in context, that's the difference between paying $20 for, say, a box of broccoli to paying $19.60. So of course, every retailer who wants to have world-leading margins and not be in there with the rest of the pack does the same thing. I include us in this, we squeeze the supply chain. But the next link in the chain doesn't have much more to give. Wholesalers are making about the same margin as retailers, actually a little bit less in a lot of cases. So naturally, that pressure gets passed straight along to the poker players, and obviously they've got enough to deal with as it is. So, how can we sustainably grow, and I'm talking about profit growth here, without punching up the growers and forcing them to give up the productivity gains that they've tried so hard to achieve? I see 3 opportunities. Number 1, we can grow the total pie. Number 2, we can shorten the chain. Or number 3, we can just choose to play a completely different game. So firstly, growing the pie. As I said before, we can't really get people to eat more food in total. However, fruit and veg, there's a great opportunity to steal share of stomach from other food groups, meats, grains, cereals, but in particular of processed foods. We've got an outrageous natural advantage, and in the global context of ageing population and obesity explosion, we are perfectly situated to grow our segment. But that will take solid marketing, and campaigns like the PMA's Pick Right, Feel Right campaign with the Wiggles is a great platform to hit the preschool consumers of tomorrow. And you can see here that they've deployed not 1 but 2 celebrity dinosaurs. I don't know how that can go wrong. But this is an industry-led initiative, and I'd urge everyone to get involved because we're all going to benefit from it. More consumption programs are being and need to be developed. Growing demand reduces the pressure in every part of the system. So option 2, shortening the chain. Aldi was in the press this week saying that they're going to increase their direct supply arrangements, and we at Harris Farm Markets are doing the same thing. Removing links in the chain can reduce cost, improve time to market and simplify communications. However, at the same time, we're hearing a lot of talk that Woolworths is putting some of their volume back into the central markets. And as a central market wholesaler, obviously I'm not advocating the end of wholesale.